Welcome to Fit After 40. I'm Tony here with Chris, and today our guest is Steven Kornhaus. He is a YouTuber and also a podcaster, and of course, an ultra runner. Welcome to the show, Steven. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks,
Welcome.
Tony. Thanks, Chris. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start off just with running a little bit because we share that sport in common. We're both ultra runners, and I don't think I've ever really talked to you too much about how you got started in running ultras. We all kind of come to this sport for different varying reasons and all, and I don't know that we ever have had that conversation. So what got you started?
So started in running, would have been, gosh, I ran track in I think middle school, and I did all of maybe a week or two and quit and dropped out. I was like, I hate this. It's not for me. I actually rolled in it. I know Tony, you know some of my history with rolling ankles, but even in middle school and
Yeah.
track, somehow on a flat round track, I rolled an ankle or somehow my ankle gave out and I like fell and I was like, this is stupid. I'm not doing this anymore and quit. But then
Yeah.
like later in life in like 2005, six, I started picking up 5Ks, did the whole 5K half marathon kind of thing, and then joined the army, ran for for PT, physical training every day.
Mhm.
In officer school, I was in like the A group with the fast guys running, 6 minute miles and 40 minutes, 5 miles, things like that, whatever, and doing that. Then got out of the army and did like everybody that's in the army when you get out is you don't want to do any physical activity and you grow a beard. So I did that for a while and
Right.
finally picked up running again kind of consistently in 2017 and I actually did a road relay race out in Oregon with some friends, and that got me kind of hooked on running. And shortly thereafter, I found a Billy Yang video on YouTube, the Why, and that was on his
Ah,
Leadville race, and
Mm.
that kind of like sparked the whole trail journey and ultra running. I was like, oh, this looks a lot more fun than running on the roads. And so
yeah.
yeah, I found trail, signed up for my first ultra marathon in 2018, which was the Ozone Endurance Challenge 24-hour race, and kind of had a goal to go do 50 miles. And Ray Krolowitz, who I knew through racing cars, who he's kind of a legend in the ultra world. He kind of put a bug in my ear that, well, you could just go try for 100 miles. It's only like a 14-minute pace. And so I kind of had that as a secret like F goal because I figured that was like, totally impossible. And I ended up, getting the 100 miles in 23 hours at that timed event because it was really flat. And that was my first ultra, and it was such a cool
Wow.
experience and got me hooked for sure.
So you went from a 5K to a 100-mile ultra in a year.
No, 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 no. So the 5Ks was like in 2005, and
Oh,
then
okay, okay, okay. You said
but
2017, and I thought that is one
no.
hell of a trajectory, Captain America.
Well, so I did before the ultra in 2018. The furthest distance I had ever run was I did a marathon in training, just
Okay.
around a park in Tennessee, a trail. Did that in training. Took me like I don't know, like 5 hours, 4.5 hours on trail, whatever it was. And that was the furthest I'd ever gone. And but the furthest race I had ever done leading up to that was a half marathon on the road. That was it.
I like that you mentioned the why too. That's probably
Mhm.
well, you'll know from ever listening to any of these podcasts when we talk about running. I think that's and usually my last question is that's the
Yeah.
inspiration for all of it. That's such a great documentary. Same thing. I watched that video and I was like, wow, I want to do
Yeah,
that.
it's
So
amazing. When
yeah.
I had the privilege of meeting Billy this year when I was at the running event and talked to him for a few minutes and told him, that I just really appreciated his work in the films and specifically the why, and that got me hooked. And he said he's like, I don't care how many times somebody says that to me, it never gets old. Like I love hearing that,
That's
and
awesome.
it was just
Yeah.
cool to meet him. Kind of like my ultra running idol.
Exactly. Yeah, that's such a great one. So you've had a few years now of ultra run. You said 2017, and now we're all the way up into 2025. In that time, what's been your favorite kind of race or adventure or anything that you've done in that time? Just if you had to pick one that was just the absolute pinnacle of your career so far.
Well, I think my like if we're talking a race, I think my favorite. race, probably experience would probably be the Leadville 100. I did that
Okay.
last year. Didn't go as planned, but I finished and got the buckle, and it's just I think
Yeah.
that was such a good experience because of seeing Billy Yang's The Y and knowing the history in that
Hmm.
race and all the people that have run this race and being a part of it was very special. Definitely some things from an organization standpoint that could have been a lot better from Leadville from the organizers
Oh, for
there, but that's a whole nother story. Um, but I think my favorite adventure that I've done would probably be the Smoky Challenge adventure run there in
that's
Tennessee,
a
North
great one.
Carolina on the AT. That was just I had set out to attempt the double scar FKT, and
Hmm.
so we started at like 2 in the morning, and which was way too early, and didn't get any sleep the night
Yeah.
before, and so I literally got
Oh, yeah.
zero sleep before that. And I remember I started with a buddy, Kevin Bishaw, a local runner in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he got injured, so it hit his head or did something like where he just was not feeling good and kind of he finished up to like Klingman's Dome, but we separated like 16 miles in. So I did the whole rest of that completely alone. And just sleep deprivation got me, and I ended up pulling the plug when I got to Davenport, finished the northbound in like 23 hours, and just was so tired and out of it. I just bailed on the double turn around and go back
Oh,
at that point.
Yeah.
So at some point, even though I'm in Colorado, I would love to come back and do that again just because that was such a great experience. The trail is so beautiful, rugged,
it's a
and
great
just
section.
it
It's a
is
good one.
so
Yeah.
it's amazing. It is one of my favorite trails I've ever been on. Loved it.
Well, if you're up to it, we're going to go back. We like to try to hit it on a pretty regular basis since we're close. And so we're going to go back this Father's Day weekend and do it this year
Oh,
again.
nice.
That's kind of become the traditional weekend is Father's Day weekend for Scars.
That's when I did it. I did it in
Oh, really?
Father's Day 2020. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
No,
it works out good.
it'll probably be a while before I can run that distance again. It's going to be a few
Yeah,
years till I
yeah,
get there.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful race, and like you said with Leadville too, that's like I always tell people one of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever had in ultra running is running through Twin Lakes. There's
Oh my
nowhere you
gosh.
could get that energy. Like there's people, doesn't matter who you are. There's people like I don't know, hundreds, if not 1,000 people just
Oh yeah.
cheering for everybody that runs through on both sides of you. It's a phenomenal experience that you don't get in ultra running very often, given the size of the races.
The size of the trail. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned you'd learned a little bit about the history of the Leadville 100, and that really made you appreciate that race more. I don't know that history. Could you give me kind of the Reader's Digest version of that? What makes this race so cool, other than the fact it's stunningly beautiful?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is one of the oldest ultra
I
marathon,
think the
100 mile
second.
distance ultra marathons. It's debatable, amongst the ultra crowd is
Sure.
which one's the older, but the town was a mining town, back in the what was it, 60s, 70s, 80s, a mining town. That was their whole livelihood, and they shut down the mine. And so this town that used to be like 30,000 people basically just everyone left and it went down to less than 3,000 people. There was no economic income for people in that area. The town just shut down and was going to go basically bankrupt and not
Right. Yeah.
exist anymore. But one, Ken Klauber, who's the founder of Leadville, him and Mara Lee Maupin, but Ken had this idea to run a foot race in Leadville to try to bring in people to bring in some money to the town to save it
Right.
essentially. And because he did that, the race just blew up, got huge. So many people were coming in. They did all these other races that brought a lot of money to the Leadville community, and it's grown now to such a hot spot in the summer for mountain bikers, runners, ultra runners, hikers. And then in the wintertime, you've got people skiing, snowshoeing, and all
Mhm.
sorts of activities. So it saved the town. And it's just become such a cool race where the community is pretty special. Um, I think Tony's experienced it, but I think
Hmm.
since Lifetime took over, though, from the majority of people I talked to that have been around that race for a while, have really said that the race is still amazing, but it's not the same since Lifetime took
Yeah.
over, unfortunately.
You can kind of see it, but yeah, just the town too. I love going to
Oh,
Leadville. If I'm in
it's
Colorado,
amazing.
I'm going to be in Leadville at some point.
Oh
It's
yeah.
yeah,
We go up there and camp with the kids. We did last year. We'll probably go up there again this year. It's just such a beautiful area. It's at 10,000 feet or higher. So here in the
yeah.
springs, when it's 95 degrees in August, I can go to Leadville and it's probably going to be in the 70s or, low 80 at
Oh, that
time. It's
sounds
it's
That's nice.
amazing.
perfect.
It's
That
great.
sounds fantastic.
The beauty of Colorado is like if you don't like the weather, you can drive an hour or two and you can find the weather you want.
Absolutely. Yep.
At least in the summer and spring. I guess in the winter that might be a little harder to do.
Yeah.
I, One of the things we talk a lot about on here is building communities, and a lot of people. I introduced you, of course, as Steven Kornhaus, which is your name, but a lot of our listeners probably better know you just as Ultra Steven because that's your YouTube channel that many of us follow quite regularly. I think you're up to just about 30,000 followers at this point on that YouTube channel.
Getting close. Yeah. UltraTrailSteven. Yeah. Getting close.
We've been getting really close there. And one of the things about uh, that YouTube channel is I feel like you've definitely built a community. It really, I mean, it started here in the state of Tennessee, and everybody, we all watch your videos and talk about them on runs and so on. And now, of course, you're in Colorado, and you've kind of expanded that base, obviously, to quite a thing. So, just talk a little bit about that platform and kind of what drew you to YouTube and how you were able to grow a community of runners with it.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I was road running and then found trail and found the love of being in nature, being present, and just not caring about, oh, that mile was 5 seconds slower than the mile before that. Crap, I got to speed it up this next mile, and kind of that pressure from the road scene, and that wasn't there in the trail, at least for me and where I found it was just solely for the enjoyment of being in nature and having a blast. And I wanted to share that with people. I wanted to have other people see there's more than splits and experience the joy of nature. And so that's why I started the channel. That was the whole reason, to share that passion and to try to get more people from the road scene to the trail scene. And along the way, as the channel, very slowly grew, I really started liking reviewing products on the channel, whether it was shoes, hydration vests, watches, whatever it is, because as a someone that was getting into the trail scene, that's what I did. I would go on YouTube if I was looking for a pair of shoes, and I would search,
Sure.
what's the best shoe for this, or what's the best watch. And I wanted to create reviews that were unbiased, that were honest, and that were not skewed by a brand. And so that's been my whole um, the thing that I've stuck to this entire time, even as I've grown and worked with tons of brands now. I tell them I'm going to be honest in my reviews. So if there's a negative aspect, I'm going to share that. Tell the brands, if you're not comfortable with that, then we're not going to work together. And so that was the whole thing I wanted to share. Originally started with the passion, then kind of moved into that reviews. Wanted to give honest reviews to help people in the community to, if they're researching whatever, they could see that this and hopefully believe that I was telling the truth, because I do. And
Yeah.
the communities come around that a lot, and it's great to have people I see at races that just oh, I watched your video on the Solomon Advanced Skin 12 vest and it really helped me make a decision to buy that. And it's I love that. It's awesome. Or they
Yeah.
watched my Leadville video or my no business videos or whatever, and they loved it. And it's really cool to really just be a part of the community in a way that kind of helps it grow a bit. And it's been special to be a part of.
The funny thing is the way I first heard about you was I was running over in Big South Fork, and I got down to oh gosh, what, Charrette. I was down at Charrette Lodge,
Hmm.
and I was running. Somebody's like, there was a guy there, and he just said, he's like, oh yeah, there's this fella named Steven, and he runs and he does videos about all the trails around here, and so that's when I first Googled you and found you and started following you on YouTube, was because of your the way you've kind of taken even that area there, because Steven was lived in a kind of the East Tennessee in an area called Jamestown, Big South Fork area. And and with your YouTube channel, you brought a lot of focus to that area, and of course to the, well, I'm wearing a hat right now, but to the no business race and
Right.
so on that goes there, and really kind of, I think, helped draw a lot of people to just realizing what a beautiful place that is, what a wonderful area the Big South Fork is. So
It's an incredible park.
Yeah, and there really wasn't any media out there about Big South Fork. There was a couple of
yeah.
hiking videos maybe, but that was about it. And even like Frozen Head State Park, you heard all of the
Hmm.
Barkley Marathon stuff, but you didn't really
Yeah.
have many other videos out there at all. And so like that was where I trained primarily was Frozen Head. So I posted tons of videos and with the Barkley Fall Classic crowd, those became very popular and people would watch them to see parts of the trail for the BFC race. And it's just
Mhm.
shedding a lot of light on these trails that were kind of unseen in that part of the country.
Yeah, and I think it's been excellent for that. And then, I guess kind of shifting more into what you're doing now too, you've kind of moved into this podcast space too, and you've taken over a very well-known running podcast called The Adventure Jogger. And what I really enjoy that podcast because what you do there is, of course, really bring the stories of runners out. And I think that's kind of your focus there. And it's everybody from like some kind of top-notch runners to even, guys like me. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate that perspective. So talk a little about what your experience has been with podcasting and what your goals are there, if I haven't completely ruined the story.
No, no, that's great. And the Adventure Jogger is a podcast I've listened to for years. When Ryan had the podcast, and it was a fantastic podcast. He built an amazing brand around that, and just a great podcast. And so I was very grateful that he, reached out to me and chose me to pass it on to. And podcasting is something that my wife and I had been considering for a while. We had wanted to do a podcast together,
Yeah.
just because we have she's an ultra runner. I'm an ultra runner. I'm also a professional. I work full time as well. I do YouTube. She's a professional. She's in grad school right now. And kind of that we have 4 kids. So it's like that. How do you find time to do this kind of stuff and work it in? We thought could be a good kind of niche. And so we've been toying around with the idea of doing that. And then Ryan reached out about this podcast opportunity, and I just felt like it was perfect timing to do it. And so it's been great. There's been some challenges. Whenever you take over something from another person that they built this community, this brand, and this following,
Mhm.
of course, there's going to be people that, were listening solely for that other host. They liked him and his personality, which he was awesome. So I lost a few viewers and people that supported the channel because Ryan was no longer the host, which I expected that. It's just a transition phase. And so
Absolutely.
I'm trying to kind of build it now more towards me as the adventure jogger
Hmm.
type thing. And a sneak peek, nobody else knows this yet, but there is going to be a rebranding coming. To actually tomorrow's episode, I'm dropping an episode tomorrow, January 24th, with Andy Jones Wilkins, and I've got
Oh,
a
wow.
brand
That's a
new
good one.
yeah, brand new logo coming out tomorrow, and going to kind of rebrand that way. It's going to be the exact same podcast. Nothing else is changing. It's still going to be focusing on the runners from the front, middle, and back of the pack, sharing inspiring and funny stories, as it says. And that's what this podcast is. It's not a podcast where I'm just going to be sitting there talking about some topic, trying to create, I don't know, like some of these people out there that do just talking head. Fake
Hmm.
motivation is kind of what I call it for some of these people,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's always gonna be about the guests, talking to the guests, hearing their stories. There's so many awesome ultra running life stories out there, and people that have gone through so much adversity in their life, and then they found running, and that kind of like saved them. And those stories are inspiring and help other
Yeah.
people. So I want to continue to share those. But it's been great, and hope to continue to build that brand and increase the listenership, the viewership on YouTube as well, and just continue to grow it and see where it goes in the next couple years.
And I think there's such a good space for a podcast like your podcast because ultra running is a really hard thing to do, and everybody has a story about how they got to it, and it's almost always an inspiring story as to like what brought you out to do this thing and why are you doing this thing. And it's everything from recovering from trauma or clearing headspace or whatever it is, but there's usually some kind of pretty strong motivator that gets people from, like I got to do something in my life, and that something's going to be I'm going to run 100 miles.
Right.
It's it's a big step. So I
Right.
think it makes for a really great podcast. So the main reason we really wanted to have you on today too, I mean, other than the fact, you've got great stories to tell about online presence is, you are a runner, and recently you in this podcast is of course about health after 40, and recently in your very early 40s, you kind of got a bad diagnosis and have had to go through a pretty trying year really now, hasn't it? Been about a year with hip replacement. So, let's just kind of give us a synopsis of how this all started and how you ended up, where you are now.
Yeah, so 2024 was definitely a very difficult year, the whole year, because it honestly started, the whole journey started in December of 2023. I was in the gym doing a
Mhm.
workout, and I felt like this cool, warm sensation in like my groin on the left side. And so I thought possibly maybe I pulled something and possibly had a like a sports hernia. And so this kind of continued on with moderate level pain for a few weeks, and then in February I was doing a pretty difficult treadmill speed workout because there was a ton of snow here in Colorado, so I was on the treadmill. And after that workout on the treadmill, I was in a lot of pain. Like I was limping through the house. I was like just in a lot of pain on my left side. And so that's where I
Mhm.
really started to go through the medical process of trying to figure out what's wrong. I had an ultrasound on the hernia to see if there was on the area to see if there was a hernia, and there was not. That was negative. Had X-rays done. Nothing came back abnormal. It was just didn't know, thought it might have been just a muscle strain. So continued running on it for about another month, and I'd be out for a 2, 3, 4 hour long run, and about 2.5 hours in, I would just get to be quite uncomfortable and a good bit of pain in that groin. And if I would like, it was cold at that time, so the lungs would get affected by running. I'd start coughing, and as I would cough, I'd be like bent over and having a lot of pain in the groin, like just really a lot of pain. And so it came to the point where March 26th of 2024 was the last time I ran. And I went out for like a 5 mile run. I made it a mile and a half, and it was just too much pain. I stopped and had to walk home. And so it was just incredibly frustrating, and just continued that process. I think I had my first MRI, I believe it was the beginning of April, and found that there was a torn labrum on the left side, and it was completely calcified. So it was basically bone on bone. And so I went through the process of finding a surgeon, and I found a surgeon here in the Springs, had surgery scheduled for June, and insurance nonsense. They wanted
Oh,
so many numbers of weeks of physical therapy. They wanted a cortisone injection, a steroid injection into the hip. So I had to get all that done. And then that surgeon ended up leaving the practice that he was at. So I had to find a new surgeon. And I was so upset, but I believe that was kind of a blessing that actually occurred at that point. After that surgeon left, I had to find a new surgeon. So I started the whole process over of trying to find a new surgeon. And during this time, I was doing physical therapy on the hip because I knew insurance required physical therapy. I had another MRI on the hip because during that first MRI, they noticed like a mass on my sacrum as well. So they wanted a close up view of the sacrum. So we found that there was a 12 millimeter mass on my sacrum, didn't know what it was. So that basically at that point, they told me just to monitor it in about another 6 months with another MRI to see if it had grown in size. And of course, when you hear a mass, everybody goes to cancer, and that's where I was. And so I was freaked out, very stressed out about that. Had another MRI. I ended up having like 5 MRIs last year, which was insane. But then had another MRI because the new surgeon I found in Denver wanted an MRI to specifically look at the angle of the femur and look more closely at the hip. And I found a surgeon to do the labral repair because originally that's what I thought I was going to have was a labral reconstruction. And when I met with the surgeon, who was, from the research I found, one of the best labral guys in the country, who is like the hip labral guy for the Denver Nuggets. So he was pretty good. I felt confident, but he noticed that things didn't look right in my hip and found some dysplasia. And so he sent me to another surgeon in Denver who was highly recommended, and had another MRI. And we did more x-rays and confirmed I did have pretty bad hip dysplasia in the left side. And they also saw hip dysplasia in my right, but it wasn't as bad. And so at that point, I was faced with an option of getting something called a periacetibular osteotomy, which is where they cut my pelvis in three places, shift it, and then put screws in, and then do the labral reconstruction 3 days later. So two surgeries in the space of 3 days, and that PAO, or the periacetibular osteotomy, the recovery for that is brutal. It's like a whole year. You're on
Oh,
crutches,
wow.
no weight bearing for 2 months. It was that or get a hip replacement. Hip replacement recovery, much better. It's known to be much quicker. And so I chose that route. Talked to the surgeon. I had ultimately wanted to go with hip resurfacing for a while because the research out there showed that that probably gave me a better chance for running, which little self promotion here. My podcast with Andy Jones Wilkins tomorrow. Definitely check that out if you're having hip issues, because that's all we talk
Yeah.
about was his journey. But ultimately, my surgeon did not recommend hip resurfacing. He said he's done numerous revisions to hip resurfacings where inside the body is just destroyed. Hip resurfacing, you're only right now in America, they're only allowed to use metal on metal joints because that's all that's approved by the FDA for a hip resurfacing.
Mhm.
And he did not recommend that for metallosis, which is where metal shards can break off and go into your body and cause basically a severe degradation of the tissue inside there. So I chose to go the hip replacement. Talked to him, told him like, "Hey, I'm a runner. I'm an ultra runner. I really want to run again." And he was on board. He was like, "Yes." He told me his exact words were, "Yes, you will run ultras again."
That's
So I
awesome.
felt pretty comfortable, moved forward, and ultimately had a hip replacement on September 9th of 2024. And so I'll pause there for, I guess, Chris. I know that was a long
Yeah.
time.
That's
So,
good.
so my first question, I'm training for a marathon right now myself, and after I do speed work, a lot of times it hurts. One of the big questions that I think a lot of people have is, when do you know something is pathological as opposed to just the normal aches and pains? And it sounds like you were unable to complete a run, so that may be the answer to the question. But what were the other red flags before that you observed?
Yeah, so I had a significant amount of like groin pain still, where I couldn't do abdominal work in the gym. I'd been in the gym since December of 2023, at least 2 or 3 days a week, lifting heavy. I had
Sure.
a strength coach. I was really trying to get stronger, and I couldn't do abdominal work. It was just too much pain and discomfort in that area. The groin, very, very painful. But as an ultra runner, I am very familiar with my body. I know my body very
Sure.
well and how it reacts and what little niggles might be, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I knew that this was a more acute, like pinpointed pain. It wasn't like just a muscle soreness, because running fast hurts. Like, don't, I mean, running a fast 5K for a PR is more painful than running a 50-mile ultra marathon. Like,
It
it,
hurts.
it hurts. So, you're expecting some pain and some discomfort in running fast. But when that pain goes to, it doesn't get better after a couple of days of recovery, and it's
Yeah.
still there, and it's limiting what you can do. You cannot get back in the gym. You cannot run. I couldn't play basketball with my kids in the driveway because of that lateral motion was just so painful on my left side, incredibly painful. So it really limited everything. The only thing I could do was pretty much cycle. And I
Okay.
got on the bike, but then towards the end, before my surgery, my right side, which had that dysplasia, started acting up,
Mhm.
and what didn't like cycling, so I had to stop cycling. But yeah,
Mm.
it's really just paying attention to your body, being aware of, is this kind of acute pinpointed pain, or does it feel like more of a muscle soreness, fatigue? And then does it go away with rest? Like, if you rest for a
Sure.
couple of days and it starts to go away, that's a pretty good sign that it's probably just a muscle fatigue or soreness.
Right.
But
Mhm.
if it doesn't go away with reduced activity, there's continued pain. I was having trouble sleeping. I couldn't lay on the
Mhm.
left side
Uh-huh.
really a lot because it's just so uncomfortable. All those were red flags, and that's where I was like, I know this is not just a muscle strain. Something is
Right.
wrong.
And you said something that I don't want people to miss. The pain was specific to certain planes of motion.
Right. Yeah. Laterally for me.
Yeah, and that's often a red flag because it means there's something wrong. Muscle fatigue is going to kind of hurt all over. If it's a
Right.
Yeah.
specific plane of motion, then it may be a red flag. That may mean there's something deeper that is going on there.
Yeah.
When you started your PT, what did they have you doing, and what results did you see from that?
So I was doing physical therapy for, I think it was 8 weeks before my surgery. It was just a requirement of my
Sure.
insurance. And so they were looking at the range of motion, taking measurements of my, how much could I lift the knee up, out to the sides, where was the pain level at as they rotated the leg outward, all that kind of stuff. But it was just basically doing different kinds of strength work with, I worked with a great physical therapist here in Colorado Springs. And I told him, like, I know I have to have this surgery. I'm going to have this surgery. So I want to focus on not trying to get this better because you're not going to make a torn labrum get better by physical therapy. It's just not
Right.
going to happen. It's going to
Yeah.
require surgery, and especially with my hip dysplasia, I knew it was not going to do anything. So I was like, we need to focus on getting me as strong and ready for surgery and my recovery as possible. So that was our goal. And so we did a lot of different, hip focused strength exercises where it was, different lateral lunges and hip thrusts and different jumping type things as well, even though it was painful. Just doing things like that to get strength in the hip so that it would ultimately lead to a smoother recovery after surgery.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And how's that going? The
It's been going
recovery.
well. So I had surgery September 9th, 2024, like I said. The first, I think it was the very next day, I had in-home physical therapy for a week. They
Right.
came and did
Oh.
different things in the house, which was great. But then I started inpatient physical therapy with the same physical therapist. So he knew my history. It was great. And I did have a complication 2 weeks after my surgery. I actually developed a blood clot in my left leg in the calf,
Yeah.
and then also pulmonary embolism in the lungs. And so, again, I credit honestly me being alive to knowing my body and ultra running specifically because I had gone to my surgeon. I saw the surgeon's assistant that day in office, the same day I went to the emergency room. I saw him that morning, told him my symptoms. I was having pain in my left calf. I had had like a fever. I was coughing up blood, like mucus with blood in it.
Wow.
Hmm.
Chest pains. It would come and go where it'd be really painful and tight, just very uncomfortable. And he was like, well, sometimes this is common after a surgery, but we want to monitor it for about 2 weeks. And if you still have these pains, come back in and we'll send you for a CT scan. That same night, I was sitting on the couch, just watching TV, and I just had this pain in my chest. And my wife had taken the kids somewhere, and I texted her. I was like, something's not right. We need to go to the hospital. And so we went
Hmm.
to the ER. We went to the ER that night. Lots of tests. 5 hours later, found out I did in fact have a blood clot in the leg and pulmonary embolisms in the lung. And we caught it very early. And like I said, I credit that to just knowing my body from ultra running. Because if I had not listened to those things I was feeling, I could have died. Pulmonary embolism
Wow.
is
Can
Yeah.
be
very,
fatal.
very bad. And
Not.
I had
Yeah.
to, yeah, it's not something you mess around with. I had two family members, my grandfather and great grandfather, who both died from pulmonary embolism. So like I was like a higher risk case. And I was on baby aspirin, all that stuff. I didn't have any special blood clotting injections for the surgery, but it was just they just put me on baby aspirin. But yeah, I had that complication, and now I'm on a blood thinning medicine for right now, Eliquis, and I'm looking at actually changing my primary care doctor to the guy that I'm with wants me to be on it for a year, and the three other doctors I've seen, and for different things, including my surgery and all that, just said that seems excessive. Like it should be 3 months to 6 months tops. And so I
Uh,
really want to find a new doctor to get a different perspective, and then I'm going to have a hematologist do some tests as well to see if I need to be on something for the rest of my life, just with the family history that I have. But other than that, the recovery has gone pretty darn well. I just finished physical therapy. This week was my last appointment, and I'm now,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I'm almost 20 weeks. Monday will be 20 weeks post-op. And so the surgeons only really require you to be in physical therapy for like 2 weeks, maybe a month tops.
Yeah.
Just because they typically are just like, as long as you can walk and,
Right.
get around, you're okay. But that was not my goal. My goal was to get back to running. So that's what we
Sure.
focused on. And I stayed with him and we focused on getting strength. And then over the last month, we were doing like he would get the ladder out and I would be doing crazy plyometrics where you're jumping forwards, laterally, sideways, single leg, doing kettlebell swings and jump squats and 360-degree jump squats and like really pushing the hip. And we'd get in the Ultra G treadmill, run there for there, and then finally got onto the regular treadmill. And so physical therapy, like if anyone has a torn labrum surgery or a hip replacement, I highly recommend stay in physical therapy as long as you can, and really have
Yeah.
that somebody that knows sports. Like find a good sports physical therapist, not someone who's just going to work on like, I mean, I don't want to sound bad, but elderly people with a hip replacement that just,
Sure.
want to walk. Like find a
Right.
sports
Yeah.
minded physical therapist and stay with them because it's been great to work with Ray. He's been a fantastic physical therapist.
It is important to find a good PT, and I've got family out in Colorado, and a cousin of mine, he's been on the podcast before. Nick is
Yeah.
a very sports focused physical therapist. He does the conventional practice, and he also works with athletes just trying to optimize performance. So he's fantastic. But
Yeah.
and I think you also mentioned something that I don't want people to miss, that how important the continuity of care is. Working with the same
Yes.
person who knows you, knows your capabilities, and understands your goals.
Right. Yeah,
Because
100%. They gotta know your goals and be on board with that because
yep,
there's so many surgeons, hip surgeons. I would say from the research I've done, the people I've talked to, this is kind of a guesstimate, but I would say probably 80% of your surgeons out there will tell you you are never going to run again. Do not run
Yeah.
after a hip replacement. It's just, and I'm fully aware that as I run, the more I run, the quicker that I'm going to wear this prosthetic in my leg and it's going to wear out sooner. But there's some surgeons out there now, and the technology has advanced where they are on board with high impact sports, whether that's boxing, CrossFit, running, hockey, whatever, where you can do these things again after hip replacement. And finding a surgeon that supports that is just the most important thing. So definitely do your research if you're facing an injury like this. Don't just go to the local doctor because he's there.
right.
If you have to travel,
Yeah.
I would recommend traveling out of state somewhere as long as your insurance cover it, if you can afford it, to get the surgery. Find a surgeon that is in line with your goals.
So really quick, tell us a little bit about the actual hip replacement that you got, because I think it was because of your goal, there was just kind of a specific type of joint that you had replaced, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know the name of the prosthetic or the brand, but it is a fully porous coated, tapered prosthetic that goes inside of my femur. So for anybody that doesn't know, essentially I had a anterior approach, so cut from the front of my leg, an incision. It's about 5 inches. They dislocate your hip, pull the femur out, and then they cut the top of the femur, the femoral head off, and then they drill and put a spike into the femur. So it goes down into my femur, probably 7 inches. And it is a kind of a tapered triangle that goes in, but it's fully porous coated, which is a good differentiation because there's some out there that are not porous and there's some that are like half porous. And what that does is that helps it really ingrow to the femur and become part of the
Hmm.
femur better and more quickly. And then as far as the joints, I have ceramic on ceramic. Uh, Most people probably just get steel or maybe steel and poly, because that's just what most people need for walking or hiking.
Right.
But for higher impact sports, my surgeon who deals with a lot of athletes and a lot of D1 at like college athletes, professional athletes, he said that ceramic on ceramic is the best case for high impact sports, specifically running. He had
Right.
operated on a girl who had qualified, I think, for the Olympic trials at some point, and she ran like 100-mile weeks on a hip replacement. So I felt
Wow.
pretty confident in the research I did going that route as well. So yeah, anterior approach in my research is one of the better options because they don't cut any muscle. If you have a
Hmm.
posterior approach through the glutes, they're going to have to cut a lot of muscle, which will increase your recovery time.
Mhm.
So finding a surgeon that does that kind of approach is a good thing as well.
I'm kind of curious too, kind of stepping back a little bit and we'll move a little bit further into the future with this as well. But like when you got that diagnosis, so what was that like, just coming from the perspective of somebody that runs as much as you do and it's such an important part. I mean, knowing runners, it's
Right.
kind of becomes
Oh
our
yeah,
identity at some point, right? So
100%, 100%. And it was tough. I'm not gonna lie, it was very, very challenging. I mean, as somebody who loves running, but has created a business around running, because I do have a small business around my YouTube channel that generates income. It's just, it was hard. It wasn't just like, I'm not going to run again, or I might not run again, or I might not be able to do ultra marathons again, but it's like, how am I going to pivot this business and try to continue to stay, gaining followers, subscribers on YouTube, and also continue to grow the channel, gain income, work with different brands. Like, that's the whole thing my channel was built around was running and
yeah,
testing products for running. So it was very stressful and it was challenging mentally. I definitely went through some dark days where I was, thinking I might never run again. Um, and I ended up seeing a therapist for a couple of weeks here in the Springs as well, just trying to kind of
yeah,
talk through those issues. Ultimately, I only saw the therapist twice because he told me that he felt that I have a great support system in place and that there really wasn't anything he could do to help me because he feels like my wife is in grad school to be a mental health counselor, a therapist.
mhm,
And we have a great relationship. She understands what I'm going through because she had a labral repair surgery almost 3 years ago, or 3 years ago now. So she
yeah,
knows a little bit. And so she's been a great support for me to have somebody I can talk to through those dark days and be there to support me, which is just amazing. I can't thank her enough. But it was challenging. And even now, it's still, there's times where I don't know if I'll run 100 miles again. I want to. I really want to. I still want to run Western States. I never did that, and I have a lot of tickets in the
yeah,
lot that I could put in the lottery as long as I can run another qualifier. But I don't know if that's going to happen. It's like, I mean, I fully am aware. I'm 41. I've had the surgery. I know that I need to revise my training. I'm a coach now as well, with a specialization in injury prevention. So I have a lot more knowledge specifically towards injuries and coming back from them. And so I know I'm going to have to modify my training. I can't be out running 60-mile weeks. I'm probably going to have to run 30 miles a week and then be on the bike for 150 miles or doing, elliptical, stair climber, rowing. I'm doing a
mhm,
lot more of that now. I'm doing rowing,
Hmm.
stair climber, biking, all this stuff. And training's going to look different. It's going to be different,
yeah,
but I'm still going to I want to be able to be in the mountains. But the biggest, probably the most difficult thing through all of this mentally was when I had the blood clots, and I'm on Eliquis right now because with the medicine that I'm on and Eliquis, it thins your blood so it doesn't clot.
yeah,
And the doctors, the surgeons all told me that if I fall and hit my head, even if I have no symptoms of anything, they
I'm
said go
bleeding.
to the ER right away. And so as a trail runner that loves to go up in the mountains
Yeah,
on remote trails, that became a real what if I never get to do that again? Because if I'm out on a trail
wow,
by myself and I fall, roll an ankle, hit my head, scrape my leg bad, I could bleed out on the trail. I could have internal bleeding in my head and die and never make it home. And so that
wow,
was really that's been the most challenging. That still like almost makes me tear up thinking about it. Like it's that
yeah,
what if, and that's why I really want to change doctors and see if I can get off of this potentially.
Right.
yeah.
Because that's been the most difficult thing through all this.
Yeah, coming up with a strategy to deal with that if you have to remain on it. I mean, I guess you can take an in reach with you or something like that, but that's not a guarantee for anything fast.
No,
So
because
it's
that could
it's
be 7, 8
Yeah,
hours before
hours.
somebody gets out
Right.
to
yeah,
me.
it
And
just for forever. So that's not a good place to be at all, I guess.
yeah, so it's definitely going to look creative trying to figure out how to train. And I might just not be able to go deep into the mountains and might have to stay more close to people, at some point. But
Yeah.
we'll see. I got to build up to that first.
Let me ask you this. So you said that you're working with athletes on injury prevention, and I realize that kind of looking backward is not always as productive. But do you think there was anything you could have done that might have reduced the risk of this injury, or was it always baked in to some extent?
So Well, hip dysplasia is genetic. And so that
Okay.
was something I was born with. And so that no matter what I did running, it wasn't going to change that.
Right.
The labrum, uh, I probably could have was impacted by running. The volume, probably impacted that to some extent, for sure. Um, Whether or not something I could have done would have changed that at some point, I don't know. It's possible that if maybe I'd started doing more cross training earlier, and
Hmm.
not running 50, 60-mile weeks, and maybe I was only running, like I said, 30 miles, but then biking or swimming or whatever. It might have
Mhm.
prolonged that at some point, but mine was bone on bone. It
Right.
was just destroyed. So there was arthritis in the hip as well. That's why another reason they wanted me to do the hip replacement was because they were starting to see for early arthritis. So yeah, it's possible it could have delayed it some, but I don't think anything I could have done could
Right.
have stopped it from happening at some point.
The dysplasia kind of baked in some level of risk regardless. So
Yeah,
where
because
are you now?
well, so now I am finally uh, running in air quotes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing 3 days a week of running, but it looks different right now. So right now it's essentially 1.5 minutes on the treadmill 4 times, and then about a minute and a half or a minute walking in between those.
Okay.
And I'm building up. So next week I'm going to be 2 minutes 4 times on the treadmill. And then once I do that for a whole week, as long as there's no like different pains, I can then go up to, 2.5 minutes, because it doesn't sound like, oh, you're only going up 30 seconds, but each one of those is adding an additional
Right.
2 minutes of running. And then by the end of
Yeah.
the week, that looks like another 8 minutes or 6 minutes of running. So it's a bigger jump. And so I have to build up all the muscles and everything in there to get used to running. And so I'm doing that. I'm doing a lot of strength training. I'm working with a strength
Hmm.
coach again right now with the specific goals of building strength in the lumbopelvic hip complex specifically. The hips, the core, the inner core, trying to get all of that strong again to support everything that's going on down there. Because even though they didn't cut muscle, they stretched the heck out of it. I mean, they stretched the
Right.
heck out of the
Yeah.
ligaments, everything in there. And so it's still, there's a lot of instability in my left side.
Hmm.
Like just yesterday, I was trying to do single leg pistol squat with like a bench behind me to go down to a bench, and
Sure.
I couldn't do it. I could not do it with my left side. There was too much pain in the trying to stabilize that left side. So I got to really focus on that. So yeah, it's just going to be doing that for a while. Strength training, cross training in the gym as well. Hopefully building up to where I feel like I can go out and maybe do a mile at some point.
Sure.
So like this year, originally I had wanted to see if I could get back to maybe doing like 100K so I could at least get a Western States qualifier on the calendar, but I don't think that's going to be possible. The way
No.
I'm at right now, I mean, maybe who knows if I can do one before November, but um, it's probably going to be. I mean, I'm just going to focus on getting back to running some and enjoying it, and just doing it for the enjoyment again, and not worrying about Western States right now until I get totally healthy. Because again, at some point, like I said, the doctor did see dysplasia on the right side, and I know that I have grade 3 damage in the right hip as well. So I know I'm going to have a surgery on that side. And depending on how bad the dysplasia is, it could be another hip replacement, or it could maybe just be a labral reconstruction. So hoping that the right side doesn't act up in the future going forward again. It didn't like cycling towards the end of before my surgery last year, but it's been fine so far, no discomfort at
Okay.
all. And so maybe if I can push that off with a couple of injections, or maybe just go ahead and do the surgery and get it over with before I'm fully healed on the left side and do that. So it's all kind of up in the
Kind of.
air. But one thing I do want to circle back on is, I mentioned I did have that mass on my sacrum. I did have
Yeah.
another MRI on that back in November, and they said that the sacrum was the exact same size. It hadn't grown. It looked like it was just a benign mass. So
Okay.
no issues there. They
Oh, that's
said so,
great.
just fine. So apparently that's very common for people that they have masses on their sacrum and their pelvis, but have no clue until they are forced to get an
Right.
MRI, and 95% of the time it's just nothing. So
Yeah.
good news there.
Yeah.
That's
That's
excellent.
positive.
Yeah.
So, you've given some of it. Do you have any advice for somebody going through this? I'm still very much hung up on just the psychology of it, like well, I guess first, what are your goals? What's the next race? Are you going to, do you see a race in your future, and what distance does that look like? or are we just
So
not even focusing on that quite yet?
yeah, I'm not focusing on that
Yeah.
yet. The next race that I will be doing is going to be a gravel cycle, probably.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Um, here in Colorado, there's tons of gravel roads and a lot of gravel bike races. So I'll probably do that. I might actually do one in a couple of months. I'm looking at a few. So weather has to warm up and get some of the snow melted away. But a running race for me this year, I feel pretty confident saying it's going to be sub ultra distance, probably, and that maybe up to that half marathon distance. Who knows? It
Yeah.
just depends on how quickly I can progress smoothly and without causing more injury. And then if also this right side, what happens there. So I really don't have any races that I'm eyeing or any goals for running a race. It's just to get that healthy and see hopefully I can run a race again. Um, the mental side of it, or I think you asked for tips for people that were kind of
Going
going
through
through
something
that.
similar to this. Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's a hip or it's a knee or it's a foot or whatever. Because even something
Yeah.
like plantar fasciitis is,
Yeah.
can take people out of running for a while. And I mean, you can run through a lot of that pain and that's not going to cause much injury as long as you reduce the volume, you're doing strength things to get that better. But um, yeah, it's just, I think having a support system is key. And I've been very blessed with my wife, who is just great to talk to. And we're very open and honest with each other about everything in life. So it's been great to have her as a support
Hmm.
system. And if somebody's out there that doesn't have a support system in their personal life, then I would highly recommend, seeing a therapist. I know there's a stigma out there, especially among men. A lot of the times with seeing a
Yeah.
therapist makes you weak. And I think that's just bullcrap. It
Yeah.
doesn't. It's completely normal. So many people see therapists nowadays. It's healthy. Mental health is incredibly important, and don't neglect it because you feel like it makes you less of a man. I mean, that's just BS. It does. It makes you more of a man because you have the courage to go do it.
To face your
And
problems.
exactly, face your problems
Exactly.
head
Yeah.
on, find a way through that pain you're going through. And maybe it's, you have to do something different for a while and you'll find enjoyment in that. I used to really hate cycling. I was the guy that I never wanted to cycle. And if I was on the bike, it was only because I was injured in running. And now
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I enjoy gravel cycling. I don't road cycle, but I enjoy gravel cycling, going on a gravel trail, and just it still gets me in nature, still gets me out. I'm working up a sweat. I'm still getting those endorphins. And I like that now. And I like hiking. So it's helped me see new things as well, helped me to have more time to spend with the family. So kind of look for positives in those down
Sure.
times. Don't focus on the negative. It seems very present at the time, but you got to focus on the long term game because just like running an ultra marathon, like a 100-mile race, it's a long race. You're in a low valley right now. You're in that bottom. You're bonking. You've got to find your way
Yeah.
to get back to the high.
Which is great because that's the thing about running 100 miles is no matter how bad you feel, you have to remind yourself that you're probably going to feel better a little later along the way.
Right.
It just takes a little while to get there. And I also
Or
just
have
really
that
like the
crew, that
yeah,
crew that
Yeah,
reminds you and tells you have that support system.
it's
exactly.
very
And then
important.
and that's the really important thing is a lot of people come to running too, and ultra running specifically for mental health reasons. And it's really hard when you have an injury. I mean, I've just had a minor injury where I fell ice skating and broke a couple ribs. But your mind goes to dark places really fast if that is kind of that is your mental health right there, is going out
Absolutely.
and doing that activity. And then also just trying to prevent that, like, oh, I'm losing this, every single day when you're injured, you're thinking like, I'm losing muscle mass here.
Yes.
I'm becoming less of an athlete. I'm losing so much that I put so much effort into and trying to, like, work through that mentally. And like you said, going to therapy is a great way to do that, and then redirecting yourself and to other interests,
Yeah,
finding ways.
absolutely. And I think a big thing as well for people that are going through an injury and as they start to come back from an injury, no matter what it is don't compare yourself to your previous self. Like I
Right.
know a lot of the
Good
times
point.
people compare amongst other people. Like Strava is great for that. The comparison is the thief of joy. You see somebody out there running a 7-minute mile and their heart rate barely gets above 135.
Right.
You're like, what in the heck? Like,
Yeah.
um, don't compare yourself to yourself though, because like I'll look back, Facebook shares my memories from previous years and I'll see, oh, this time last year I was out doing 20-mile run in the mountains with, 7,000 feet of elevation gain. And it was so great. And it was awesome. And it took this time. And now I'm running a 12-minute pace for 2 minutes on the treadmill and I'm sweating like crazy. And it's like, this is a lot harder
Yeah.
than it probably should be, but it's like, I got to focus on just where I'm at in this specific stage of my journey.
One way I sometimes like to reframe that, and I haven't gone through anything like that though, is, one of the reasons you get into something like ultra running is because it's a process of starting from someplace and then building to something greater. So as long as you contextualize it within where you are, which is what you're kind of saying, don't compare yourself to your previous self, but you know, if you could take your injury and and it sounds like what you're doing is kind of it's a new challenge, so you look at
Mhm.
it as a challenge. I am here now, but I'm going to get here, and these are the steps I'm going to do to take it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the joy of ultra running right there anyway, is like setting those plans and setting those goals and trying to achieve them. So
Yeah. And I'll say, like, trying to find a positive in a difficult situation is very, very tough, but it's good. And I think one positive looking back that has come out of my whole hip journey is I've helped a lot of people. And what I mean is like my YouTube videos. So my
yeah,
hip surgery video where like I go through pre-surgery tips and different things that I would recommend getting to help you after you have the surgery and then that first week of surgery after the first week post-op. That video has over 400, almost 450,000 views on it. It's the highest viewed
Wow.
video on my channel by a long shot. And thousands of comments on this video where people are like, your video has helped me tremendously because it showed me that what I'm going through, I'm having the same pains you are. Like, thank you for being honest. There's
yeah,
people out there that make videos that are like, oh, everything's great. I haven't had any
Right.
pain and it's fantastic. It's like I show the real stuff. And so people have connected with that. And knowing somebody else has gone through what you're going through and that it's not going to be this bad forever and it's going to get better. Because my
yeah,
video, like I've done a series where I'll release a new video every 3 or 4 weeks and kind of like how the progression of recovery has gone and where I'm at. And so people can be like, I just had surgery 2 weeks ago, and seeing that you're now doing this has been so helpful because it knows that, I'm not always going to be this way. And it's just so focusing on that, like, yeah, it sucked for me and, not being able to run at times, but I've like, possibly helping thousands of tens of thousands of people potentially.
yeah.
Like, it's pretty amazing. And it's cool to focus on that and to know that maybe I could help inspire some people and help them get through a low spot that they're going through. So that's something I've tried to focus on, just to help me kind of mentally get through it too.
No, that's great.
That's tremendous. It's
Yeah.
everybody who works out at a high level is going to get injured at some point, and even a minor injury could be so just very
Yeah.
frustrating. And to see you coming back from something so much worse, and coming back from it in a strong way is really inspirational. And being upfront about the challenges, because people see the before and the after, and they're like, "Oh, he was injured and now he's great." Well, no, there's a lot of work that goes on in between. There's a lot of pain that goes on in between, and and documenting that is important for a lot of people, I think, because people don't know.
Right. And just like running watching an ultra running video, people typically like the ultra running videos where they see the person suffering and going through it because
Yeah,
they get through it and they can relate to that. And it's the same thing with surgery. Show the suffering, show
yeah.
the pain, and that it's not always going to be that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we run ultras because we want to overcome a hurdle, really, in some ways. So, and that's why I think they're so applicable to life. I mean, yeah, I would you say that your ultra running experience, like the experience of being on these very difficult runs, helped you get through this process because it gave you some mental strength that you maybe would not have had without knowing having those experiences.
Maybe. I'd say like ultra running and running long, like 'cause I was the type of person where I'd go out and I'd be on a long run in the mountains for 5, 6, 7 hours. Like it wasn't just a 2 hour long, and I'd be out there for a long time,
Hmm.
doing hard trails. And ultra running has taught me to know my body, and I think that's
Hmm.
what I just keep coming back to. The mental side of it, like I've always been one of those people that I've been pretty mentally strong. Like I've never gone into
Hmm.
a race with a thought, oh, I wonder if I can finish this. Like it's always
Yeah.
been, I know I'm going to finish this race. And like quitting was never an option. There's only been one time in my entire life that I've ever wanted to DNF a race or wanted to drop out. And that was the Laurel Highlands Ultra. And it was 2 months after a very severe ankle roll. And I was in pain in the race, and I actually rolled that same ankle in the race.
Hmm.
And so it was a lot of pain. I wanted to quit. My wife didn't let me quit. She pushed me on, and I credit her for that again. But that was only like 32 miles into a 70-mile race. But I ended up finishing pretty darn well. So I've always been mentally strong and not had those demons where it's like I'm fighting like the what ifs, I guess. And so I don't know if I can say that's because of ultra running, because I feel like I've had that since before. Maybe it was from when I was in the army. I don't know, but I certainly credit ultra running and running to helping me know my body intimately and
Hmm.
knowing everything about it, if something is wrong. And again, that saving my life basically.
And that's something important. A lot of people who don't exercise as much as some of the rest of us maybe don't understand. One of the kind of knock-on benefits, right, is that you do learn your body in that way, and you do
Right.
know when something's wrong. You do have a better
Yeah,
intuition for it.
Yeah.
You
absolutely.
know what it feels like to have normal hurt.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yes.
exactly. Well, I guess to kind of come full circle to where we started, the question I always do, an inspiration of our apparently mutual favorite ultra running video, the why, is I ask people what their why is. Like, what is your why for? And we've gotten a lot of that from you, but ultimately, like, what is it that drives you to run ultras? What is it to run these long adventure runs?
That's a great question. And I think it all comes down to kind of like what you just said, where we all like to put ourselves through suffering and not just put yourself into suffering for suffering, but to see what's on the other side. And if you can get through
Hmm.
it and get stronger because of it. I remember the very first time I ran 9 miles on the road. And I remember that was so difficult. And it was in Tennessee. So I was drenched in
Yeah.
sweat and salt because it was in September, I think. But I just remember that being so difficult. I was training for a half marathon and I was like, why would anybody want to run a marathon? Like they're stupid. Like that's just dumb. And now I've run 136 miles is the furthest I've run. And I got to the point where it's like you have these things in your mind that you think are impossible or you don't know if you can do fully, but then you do them. And it's like, well, what else
Hmm.
can I do? And it's that self-improvement, that self-exploration of what else can I do or what else is my body capable of that I love. And like so the 100-mile distance, I got to the point where I think I did 500-mile races. I got to the point where I knew I could complete a 100-mile race. Like it was challenging, but I knew I
Yeah.
could complete. And so like I was supposed to do a 200-mile race last year, and that was so exciting to me because that was a completely new challenge, something I have
Hmm.
no clue about, like completely unknown. And I was so excited for that. And so I think it's just that self-exploration, that self-improvement, and seeing that your body is capable of so much more than you think is what drives me. Like I want to see what's the limit, or is there a limit, or is it
Mm,
just the mind that's the limit?
Yeah.
So I think that's what drives me.
That's awesome.
that's awesome.
Well, thanks
Well,
again for coming on, and for everyone
yeah.
out there, of course, be sure to look up our Ultra Trail Steven, excuse me, on YouTube and follow along on there. And also, you can I encourage you all to listen to the Adventure Jogger too. Some really great stories that happen on there, and I'll have links to both of those on our show notes for this as well, so you can easily find them. But once again, thanks for being on the show today,
Thank you
Steven.
for taking the time to talk with us. This was fantastic.
Yeah, it's been great. I appreciate you guys having on. I think it's a fantastic idea of a podcast. Like the fit after 40 is like it does look different than when you're 20 or 30. It looks a
Yeah,
lot different.
It
And I
does.
think it's a great show. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you.
thank you so much.